Hello, good evening. Welcome to St. Peter's in Hove. I'm Father Alexander, and tonight let's talk about Gideon. And in particular, let's talk about Judges 6 and 7, the career of Gideon, our 65th step through the Bible. Now, Gideon, you might just like to read those chapters 6 and 7. They might surprise you somewhat. Okay, so put me on hold and read those chapters, and I'll say something about them. Okay, first of all, in chapter 6, verse 7 and 8, 7 to 10, we have a little episode where a prophet comes along and upbraids the people of Israel for apostatizing, for leaving the worship of the Lord and going after the Baals, the Canaanite gods. This is the first prophet to appear in the Bible. And he reminds the people of what they've done, of what God did for them, liberating them from Egypt, and telling them that God is God. They don't need to be frightened of the Amorite gods, the gods of the Canaanites. But you have not listened to my voice, says God through the prophet. Now, this, I think, is one of the major themes of the entire Bible, Old Testament and New Testament. You have heard the voice of the Lord. You have seen what the Lord has done, but you have not listened to the voice of the Lord. To use an old translation, you've not hearkened to the voice of the Lord. In other words, water off a duck's back. You have not absorbed what the Lord is asking of you. Now, this does get us thinking, because clearly we, the people living today in this country and other countries besides, we're just like those ancient Israelites. We have had the experience but missed the meaning. We have not listened to the Lord our God. We have largely ignored his ways, his words, and his commandments. So the book of Judges is a very up-to-date book for us. Anyway, the angel of the Lord then appears to Gideon and goes up in the sacrifice. So Gideon falls down on his face and so on, and he's deeply moved by the fact that he's met the angel of the Lord. The angel of the Lord says, "Thou mighty man." But Gideon says, "Well, I'm the least person in my father's house and my father's tribe." Then what Gideon does is, in the middle of the night, he destroys the altar of Baal and he burns the sacred pole, and he reestablishes the worship of the one true God by sacrificing his father's bull on the reconstituted altar. Now, in this, if we just look forward a bit to the books of the Kings, this is exactly what the prophet Elijah does on Mount Carmel. He rebuilds the altar and he sacrifices a bull to the Lord, and he destroys the sacred poles. The destroying of the sacred poles is also done by King Josiah later on. So clearly, it's not just necessary to worship the Lord in the way the Lord wants to be worshipped. It's also necessary to destroy, extirpate, and render into nothing, annihilate the worship of Baal. The two cannot coexist. I don't know what this sacred pole is. I don't think anybody knows what this sacred pole is. Clearly, it was a bit like a totem pole that people had in North America, a pagan symbol, something you worshipped. Maybe it was some sort of phallic symbol or something like that. And of course, it was a high place on the mountain. On every high place, they prostituted themselves to the sacred poles and the altars of Baal and so on. So then Gideon calls the people to arms against the Amalekites. And then God gives him another sign, the sign of the fleece, and then the sign of the fleece being dry. And then God does something very strange. He whittles down Gideon's army. Those who are frightened can go home. Those who stay, those who drink their water in a certain way, are sent home, and those who drink their water in another way remain, until Gideon's army is just 300 people, which is 300 men, which is not very much. He pitched his camp at the Ein Harod, the spring of Harod, which apparently is still there to this day. Now, he has therefore got 300 men, and then by a very clever trick, he surrounds the Midianite camp in the middle of the night. They blow their trumpets, they smash the pots in which they've got the torches. The Midianites all rush out and start killing each other, and then they all rush off and in confusion, and he follows them with his 300 men and massacres the lot. So what's the point of this? Well, the point of this is that the victory belongs to God and God alone, a bit like the victory of Jericho. The reason Gideon has a success against the Midianites and drives them out of the land of Israel is not because Gideon is such a great general. It's not because Gideon's forces are overwhelming. It is because God has the victory. Now, what this tells us, I think, is that we must not rely on our own forces, our own strength, our own ingenuity, our own will, if we want to overcome the forces of evil. Rather, we must rely entirely on the grace of God. What this story is telling us is the grace of God is paramount. The destruction of the Midianites is a free gift of grace to the people of Israel, given them by God. Now, I was asked a question last night. I was giving a talk, and I was asked by somebody, what is grace? Well, I said, grace is the single most important concept in the Christian mindset, in Christian theology. And it's largely an argument about grace that caused the Reformation, and an argument about how to interpret what St. Augustine was saying about grace. And also, I believe it's also a thing between the Orthodox and the Catholics, the question of grace and how it works. Well, I tried to explain what grace is. Well, grace is this. In Italy, they have something called the Ministry of Grace and Justice. Justice is what condemns you. Grace is what forgives you, commutes your sentence, or cancels your fine. Grace is what lets you off. Grace is what tears up the IOU and throws it away. That's what grace is. In England, sometimes if the Queen gives you a grace and favour house, it means you don't pay any rent. Grace is God's free gift to us. If you're in somebody's good graces, it means you're friends with them, they look upon you with favour. Grace is the favour and friendship of God, which is given to people despite their inability to earn that good favour. It's a free gift. So grace is what God gives us, which justifies us, as St. Paul says. In other words, makes us right with God. The grace given to Gideon is to be able to lead the people of Israel into battle against their enemies and score a huge victory. Now, of course, that is, if you like, a material thing, whereas grace is immaterial. The real grace that we have received is what enables us to do good works and what enables us to believe the right things and to love with all our hearts those that we should love, above all, God himself. And let's go back to this key line. The angel of the Lord appeared to him and said, "The Lord is with you, valiant warrior." Gideon replied, "Excuse me, my lord." Now, Gideon, I think, picks up that the angel of the Lord is being slightly sarcastic. Because the reason, if the Israelites were such valiant warriors, how come they're being oppressed by the Midianites? How come that while he's threshing his wheat in the winepress to hide it from the Midianites, he can't even bring his wheat out because the Midianites will pinch it because he's so oppressed by them? So you valiant warrior, I think is a reproach. You're not really valiant at all. You coward, you oppressed creature. And he said, "Excuse me, my lord, but if the Lord is with us, why is all this happening to us?" So he turns it round and says, "Well, you call me a valiant warrior, and I'm not, but all this is happening to us, all this bad stuff is happening to us. Is the Lord really with us or not? Because if the Lord was with us, these bad things wouldn't be happening to us. And where are all his miracles, which our ancestors used to tell us about when they said, 'Did not the Lord bring us out of Egypt?' But now the Lord has deserted us. He has abandoned us to Midian." So Gideon is in fact accusing God, if you like, of abandoning them. But also he's just underlining the very simple thing that Jesus Christ himself says, "Without me, you can do nothing." God has abandoned them. That's why they're in dire straits, because without God, the whole project of the people of Israel collapses. Without God, and without total reliance on the grace of God, the whole project of the church collapses. Without reliance on the grace of God, the church becomes just yet another NGO, and not even a very successful NGO at that. At this, the Lord turned to him and said, "Go in this strength of yours, and you will rescue Israel from the power of Midian. Am I not sending you myself?" In other words, God is sending you. "Forgive me, my Lord, but how can I deliver Israel? My clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least important in my father's family." "I shall be with you," says the Lord, "and you will crush Midian as though it were one man." And he said, "If I have found favour in your sight," says Gideon, a bit like the Virgin Mary, who has found favour in the sight, "Lord, if I have found favour in your sight, give me a sign," etc. And the Virgin Mary also asked for a sign. There's some parallels with Luke chapter 2. So the grace of God is what we rely on. The grace of God is what will give us victory in our spiritual struggles. It's a very, very good story, this of Gideon, and it underlines a great theological truth. Hope you've enjoyed that. Hope to see you again soon. Bye.